As our next speaker, I would like to introduce Patrick Courtney. Patrick has been an expert at the European Commission, where he's leading the group of laboratory robotics, and he has more than 20 years of experience in technology development. He's also an executive director of Tech Connection and a board member of the SiLA consortium. Thanks, Patrick, for being with us today.
Okay, thanks for the nice introduction. So, and it's a great pleasure to be here today as part of this interesting program that has been put together on the Knime series. So I'm going to speak to build on the last talk, focus a bit more on the interoperability aspects in the context of what we've done within SiLA. So SiLA is Standards in Lab Automation. It's a non-profit that produces open standards for the lab. So I'll focus on that, talk a little bit about the standard and the process we follow, because that is an important part. I'll talk about control and data, and there we have a partnership with Animal. That's the Analytical Information Markup Language. I'll talk about the commands, I'll talk about the concept and the structure, the community that we have around us, which is hugely important, and then a slide on what's coming next. So as you'll have heard earlier, we have a lab which is traditionally not very connected, different devices from different manufacturers, each doing some great work for us as scientists in the lab, but we're missing connectivity, we're missing devices that talk to one another as we're getting used to in the home with mobile phones and elsewhere in our lives. So the lab of the past, going to the lab of the future, requires better connectivity and devices that talk to each other. You saw this slide earlier. This presents this collaboration that we've had with Knime, with Biosero, and I'm going to show you now a short video, a 2-minute video that illustrates some of this before I enter into more detail on the standard. The video. So this is one of the outcomes of this collaboration we've had. Let the video talk. So this is a Knime workflow. Many of you will recognize this already, integrated within the Biosero environment. And what you're going to see is 3 devices in the lab. You're going to see an incubator, a robot, and a plate reader. So here we go with the incubator holding a set of plates with cells being grown in them. And we need to take the plates out in order to process them, to read them. And this is where the robot, you'll have recognized that from an earlier video, knows what to look for, knows how to pick it up. And start to transfer this across. Of course, this could be done by hand, but if you do it by hand, you have always a risk of dropping the plate, of misplacing the plate, and otherwise causing some confusion, which will result in artifacts in the error. And you'll also have problems or challenges doing this at the weekend or in the evening to have to serve the robot. And here we go, placing the plate in the cavity of the plate reader, the Biotech plate reader, which can then take some measurements and generate the data, which is after all what we want to see when we're doing lab work. And once it's finished, you can skip there a bit. Back the plate will go into the incubator where it can carry on doing the culturing, and the cells will be kept happy after the readout. So a simple application, a simple example, but one we just put together to show that we could bring together the software, the integration software, the scheduling, the Knime tools, and what SiLA offers us in terms of interoperability of these different devices from different manufacturers. Okay, and then back where we started. So maybe if we can move back to the presentation. Thank you. So let's go deeper into interoperability and specifically standards-based interoperability. So for sure, you can build these systems using proprietary interfaces and proprietary data formats. And many people do that and perfectly happy. But as we move forward, we realize that this is expensive. We have problems of flexibility when we want to change to do new experiments. And we have challenges in terms of archiving and compliance of the data. And the overall cost of ownership is relatively high. With SiLA, in partnership with Animal, which brings together the commands, the data structure, the communications framework, we are working with open communication protocols and open data formats. The benefits there are cheaper, so we're reusing tools, protecting our investment. It's quicker because, again, we reuse interfaces and we can try things out. We're more compliant because we have a better trace of the data, and it's more sustainable. We respect the value of the data, and there's this principle of FAIR you'll hear more about later, and an overall total lower cost of ownership. Within SiLA, this is an organization as a non-profit which brings together and tries to align the interests of suppliers, integrators and lab users that normally have a maybe more transactional relationship. So for users, it's time to market for their system, flexible and rearrangement use of the systems, and enabling innovation. For device suppliers, it's a single interface for multiple integrators. And for integrators, it's managing the risk and putting together a big multi-device system for the users. And on the right-hand side there, you see logos of our member companies. There's about 40, and you may recognize some big names like Tecan on the supplier side, Roche and Novartis on the user side. So if we talk for a moment about the architecture, we have a service-oriented architecture. We see the devices in the lab as entities that provide services. They are instruments, but around those we build a workflow, and it's very important for the reporting of the data and the presentation of the data. And as I said, to avoid manual data transcription, because that is where quality is impacted and where we suffer as scientists. The devices interact in a loosely coupled manner, so this echoes the microservice architecture as we see in modern terms on the web, and we leverage modern technologies, HTTP2, RPC, zero config, and XML. Very important is this is an open standard. This is no license fees, no royalties, so very low barriers to using and exploiting. And again, all based around the data. We want the data to be findable, interoperable, accessible, and reusable, fair across the organization and beyond the organization between collaborating organizations. And we'll hear much more about that in a later talk. So let me dive now into how SiLA itself works inside and the guts of it. It's a client-server type approach. We have a SiLA client and it talks to a SiLA server. So the first part of that is something we call discovery. You may recognize that from your mobile phones. This first thing to do is to answer the question, hello, who is out there? So LIMS, a laboratory information management system, might start off by interrogating the environment, and it will hear back from a balance, say, on the lab, say, hello, I'm here, and it may hear back from a chromatography data system that likewise says, hi, I'm here too. So the LIMS knows what it's got about. So a peer-to-peer approach rather than the strict hierarchical approach we might have seen in the past. The next step is feature discovery. So we know who's around, but the question is, what can you do for me? And the balance clearly will be able to weigh samples because it's an analytical balance. And a chromatography system will be able to do analysis, separation, and detection as an HPLC can. So we have features that are offered by the balance. You'll have the SiLA services of the kind you just heard about. There'll be the classic weighing service, the core of what we bought the balance and expect it to do. And then in a quality lab, an analytical lab, we'll expect some other services. Calibration, it must be calibrated. Is a gram today the same as a gram last week? We'll have a monitoring service. Is it still alive? Is it still working well? And a qualification service. So playing into IQ, OQ type approaches. Likewise, for high-performance liquid chromatography, we'll have the similar SiLA service, but we'll have these other services appropriate for the device. So method management, sequence submission, and so on. And then we can start to knit these together. So we've got the client, the LIMS system, and we've got these servers, the balance and the HPLC. So we can start to pull together some protocols. We can bring in other devices, for example, a barcode scanner, which when we want to track samples, of course, that's an essential tool. We can flip the roles, so client server is not set in stone. We can also have client-server, server-client. So a lot of flexibility in the design of the system. So let's talk now about what SiLA proposes. What SiLA does as an organization, it develops the standard. So I've got here, see where the camera is? We've got the printout of the SiLA standard. So it's a book, it's a document. In reality, this is a living document, so you wouldn't consult this. You'd go on the web and you'd look at the live document. This has 3 parts. It has a core part A, which defines the overall concepts of the kind I've just explained to you very briefly. We have a mapping of those to concrete technology, part B, and we have a part C, which is the feature mapping stage, and that's the part that's flexible and extendable and permits evolution. Very important within SiLA organization is we have a governance process, so it is a managed evolution of the standard. It's not just anybody contributing as they will, and that operates around a working group with members and volunteers. The community around that then produces some reference implementations which encode and make available what's in the standard. And at the moment, we have open source code in 4 language bindings. So Python, Java, and variants of C, and the others have been developed. So we have there the standard, which is managed and maintained and flexible, and we have software which is available and accessible on the open source basis. Let me now switch to some of the applications that we've seen being developed using this. Just some of the ones brought together on this slide. So on the upper left-hand side, you see an example of a modular lab that brings together, I think, 8 or 10 devices. So an incubator, a liquid handler, a barcode reader, put together by the Equicom company, which is a SiLA member for HDC. And that results in a modular lab. It will do a particular task today, but in 2 months' time, when you want to repurpose that, SiLA allows you to do that very quickly and easily. In the top middle, you've got a lab gateway, a SiLA gateway, put together by Applied Scientific Technologies. And that's like a kind of Wi-Fi box that allows you to communicate to a number of devices. It provides a manager-level dashboard. You see the icons of it above in blue. And that gives a view on asset utilization and performance, which is very important at the lab manager level, perhaps a bit less so at the scientist. And that was developed more for the formulation world, where we have a different set of needs than we do in a classic life science screening lab. Top right there is a mobile robot. You heard already a little bit about that, put together by Aztec Projects, a well-trusted and well-appreciated base, which is used in warehouse applications. On top of it, a robot arm again from industry. So these are components which are well accepted in other sectors, but relatively new to the lab world. And then finish off at the bottom there, a couple of examples of smaller devices, a robot-friendly fridge and incubator, common tasks, common devices in the lab, usually domestic ones, and ones which are not very robot-friendly. Here we've added an automated door opener, an interface through SiLA that was put together for a lab biotech company in the Basel area, and was very well accepted. And finally there, a smart device, which is a colony picking robot for the synthetic biology community, put together by Singer Instruments in the UK. Slightly different application area, but it's a startup company, and they wanted to get in the market very quickly without having to develop their own custom interfaces, which would then have to be explained and documented. And SiLA provides that quick up and running, quick to market approach. So what's next? So 3 aspects there. First of all, of course, linking in with AI, machine learning, and the data science community, which has grown hugely in the last few years. And we're very pleased to have this collaboration, this work that we're doing with Knime, which is the basis, I think, of some of today. Fantastic basis that Knime have got. So we're delighted to be able to connect to that and make that available to the SiLA community. You'll hear more in the next talk. We've recently released a SiLA service-initiated connection, so cloud connectivity, but from the lab device out, which avoids issues if you want to go through the firewall in. And we're working on an edge gateway, little icon of it there on the right, to try and make it easier and easier for people to try things out. And thirdly, robotics in the laboratory. Still a lot of tasks being done by hand, still a lot of samples being lost and misplaced. And we have a hackathon series coming up in partnership with the local life science network in the Constance area, Bio Largo, and that will be open online, so you'll hear more about that in due course, and we hope Knime will be an element of that. Building the community is hugely important, as I said, the users, the vendors, both hardware and software, but the academics, because they're doing more and more new things, and they're really where the new ideas are tried out. Startups, as I said, we can get them to market quicker by saving time and effort on standards. We have about 40 member companies and over 2,000 personal members, engineers, product managers, scientists. It's free to enter, and that's a great community. We do these hackathons, previously face-to-face, but now online, and those work quite well. We have these collaborations, so I just mentioned there the Kiwi Lab, which is a collaboration in the northern part of Germany. Technical University of Bremen is leading that and trying to do new things in bioprocessing and using SiLA, leveraging SiLA as the glue that brings their devices together. And workshops, we bring together people on AI, smart lab, robotics, and we'll continue to do that. So I thank again the people who contributed to my slides here in my talk. I thank again Knime for the opportunity to talk today. DIH here and Biolago working with us at Kiwi, and you see some links there which will be distributed again later if you want to find out more. So with that, I close and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Very nice presentation. So I'm coming from what I would say is a classical low-scale university wet lab. And I haven't seen a lot of automation. What's actually your take on that? And also, what would you say, like how far down the road are we with lab automation there? And do you see also a difference, for example, between universities and industry?
I think there has been a difference, and SiLA comes out of high throughput screening and pharma industry. But in the last few years, we've taken more notice of the academics. And you're right, the very small labs use the PhDs as cheap glue, and but that limits the ambition on the scale of the experiments they can do. So more and more with new genomics, with data science, the ambition of the universities is much bigger. With COVID also, collaborations that are being set up. So I think they're much more center stage than they were in the past, and important partners of the SiLA community.
Great, thanks. Janina, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do. So the first question is, what are the troubles you encounter the most with the SiLA adoption?
So one of the issues we found is overcoming the barriers between the lab users and the vendors. SiLA's been around 10 years, and in the early days, certainly there was a lot of skepticism about defending the existing products and giving away too much. As data has become more important, people have seen data as being the precious thing. But I think now in the last couple of years, people more realize that the data is the important thing. And if we share the data, we make it available in an open format, that makes some of those criticisms and those concerns go away. And so data science and what we'll hear about later, the data, sharing the data, opens the doors for collaboration.